All right, welcome back to the Dental Domination Podcast. My name is Dan Bryan. I'm the co-founder at Dental. We're an online marketing agency for dental practices specifically, but today I'm not here to talk about any of that. I'm here to spend some time with a very special guest we have today, Monica Capelli. She is the founder and CEO of Revv Systems, really focused on revenue cycle management for dental practices and healthcare practices specifically. But I want to talk today about some topics that I'm pretty sure that most dentists listening to the show might find interesting. So claim filing best practices, pursuing outstanding claims. And this is an interesting one, Monica, that I want to pick your brain on here in a little bit. Prepayment to stop the bleeding. I think that's something that everyone is maybe spent some time thinking about, but maybe is a little bit too afraid to poke the bear on, so to speak. But let's get into it here. So if you don't mind, Monica, could you just share a few things about yourself and what got you into this? And you're a former dental practice manager, is that right?
I am, yes.
Okay, awesome.
I'm
So,
also
so
married.
how'd you get here?
Well, I'm married to a dentist for 37 and a half years.
Oh, so am I. All right, well, there we go.
And one of the things I noticed in managing my husband's practice, and at one point we had two, but I noticed that insurance was the bear. It's
Yeah,
the bear in the room that no dentist wants to address. Most of the time, the front desk is handling it, and the dentist has little to any uh, degree of firm grasp on the numbers. They
yeah,
may know, oh, the revenue doesn't look like it should, but they don't know firmly what's going on. Where's my pay? And when we start running reports, and when I took over as his office manager, one of the first reports I ran was the outstanding insurance report. And it can be really eye opening. And a lot of
yeah,
practices don't run that. But once you do, and you start to dig into those numbers, there's room for improvement. So over the years, I developed systems to improve and reduce those numbers and get the dentist paid. And then I began marketing it, and then I formed my company. And
yeah. Pretty safe to say most clients you deal with, they look at those numbers the first time and it's pretty scary.
it can be, yeah, it
Yeah,
can be. It can be in the hundreds of thousands.
it's crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. So, your company, Revv Systems, you talk about elevating clients' billing practices and ensuring that practices get paid faster. So, what do you mean by that? And how do you go about doing that? What's sort of the bread and butter of your business?
Sure, I'd love to explain it because I nerd on this stuff. And if I get too detailed, stop me,
All
okay?
right. All
That's
good.
what I love to do. But we start off with our full service. We start off with the claims audit, which
Mhm.
means our experts will just go through up to 24 months of claims and find any of them that are still payable that are outstanding. And then we begin to reprocess those claims through appeals processes or whatever's required. We literally contact every insurance company by phone. We don't just go to the portals because you don't always get the full details. And we ask specifically, what do we need to do to get this claim paid?
Yeah.
And then we make sure we meet their criteria. So we have a really good system for just finding the outstanding claims.
Yeah.
That's the side that you've already missed. But there's also things that we can do on the front end to keep that pile from growing in the future. So we want to
Right.
stop the bleeding on the AR by implementing really great systems for everything from verification through claims filing and patient collections, et cetera.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to get into that prepayment that you talked about to stop the bleeding. Before we go there, though, like you said, a lot of practice owners, a lot of dentists, they may not be as deep into the reporting and into the weeds as maybe they should be. Quite honestly, dentists, you can't blame them. My husband didn't go to school to learn how to run a business. He learned how to be a clinician, and we talk about marketing a lot on this podcast and how dental schools certainly don't prepare dentists to market their practices or really, own a business, so to speak, but they're really not giving them much in the way of preparation to manage the finances. And so when you talk about claim filing best practices, let's boil it down to basics here. What are some of the best practices that you really focus in on and recommend that practices implement in order
Sure.
to make sure that they're getting the revenue that they deserve?
Yeah, there's a couple of key areas that you just you have to get right if you want to
Hmm.
get paid consistently. One of them, first and foremost for me, is making sure you're collecting the correct demographics on the patients. A simple transposition of the birth date, the name spelled incorrectly, anything like that can cause the insurance company to reject the claim. Something
Yeah.
that basic sounds like we shouldn't have to mention it, but you do, especially because some people will use like their middle initial versus their middle name and all
Sure.
these things. So first and foremost, make sure every demographic that you enter into the database is correct.
Yeah.
Second, when you go to do those verifications now, you get really detailed verifications. And most of the time people tend to verify about 40 or so, 40, 45 kind of basic codes that you want to verify. But what I find is the devil's in the details. And it's nice if those are the only codes you do. But some dentists like to make sure they're getting the ortho. Some dentists want to do night guards, things that aren't on the standard verification when you just run into an insurance portal. So if you
Yeah.
have any kind of customized specialties in your office that you know you're going to want to talk to your parents, to your patients about, you want to make sure you get that upfront in the original verification. I also like to do a follow up verification because the once a year verification is fine for most patients.
Hmm.
However, there's going to be those patients that you just did a crown on, submit the claim, and it comes back they're out of benefits. Why? Because we didn't re-verify just before they got that crown, and they had gone somewhere else and used some of their benefits, or
Yeah.
or they didn't report a frequency limitation that the insurance company knows. So there's all those different kinds of little nuances that can cause a hang up in payment.
Yeah.
So what we do, and what I highly recommend if you have the in-house team to do, is at least 2 days, sometimes 3 days before the appointment, you verify code by code for everything that's on the restorative side of the schedule. And
Hmm.
even periodontal and up, I would say, because periodontal is another one where there may be out-of-pocket expenses and there could be, funky limitations on.
Sure.
And if you do that in advance, if there's any anomaly, then you have time to call the patient ahead of time before their appointment and get that handled. That's
Yeah.
that I say verifications, people poo-poo and they think I'm going to push a button and get an electronic verification. To me, that's where your revenue lives,
Yeah.
really. So I don't want
And
to
how
push
many
a button.
practices, what percent of practices that approach you for service are already doing that? I can't imagine it's that high that are paying,
No.
that much attention or doing it, like you said, in advance, 2 or 3 days before the appointment. What percentage of practices would you guess are doing that?
Maybe 5%.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
much.
And for you, you've seen that, you said that can be a pretty big game changer.
It's a huge game changer, yes. And the other thing is too, making sure that the claims are filed in a timely manner. Whenever I do those audits, I find unfiled claims galore,
Wow.
which most patients, I had one practice recently that I picked up a few months ago, 41% of their claims, 41%.
Did you just see my eyes go crazy?
Yeah, they were submitting all of the, hygiene claims were going without a flaw. But most of the restorative claims, if there was anything that needed any kind of attachment, they were just submitting everything. And if your software stops you for attachments and stuff and nobody goes back and fixes it, yeah, your
That's a
claim
lot of money on the table.
is a lot of money on the table.
Yeah. So, and to
That
that point, because I'm just, I guess I'm a gossip. What's the craziest, outstanding AR you've ever seen working with a practice?
well, I'm small fry. I have friends
Okay.
who are big fry, so I'll just talk
Fair
about
enough. No, no, I'm talking about just a solo practitioner, solo practice. Like what?
700,000.
Oof, oof, yikes.
Yeah, but I have friends in bigger companies that are handling like, huge groups and DSOs and things. That's small potatoes.
Right, right. But I mean, just imagine. Okay, so we've talked about verification, we've talked about demographic info. What other claim filing best practices do you often, recommend that practices implement when you first start working with them?
Yeah, sure. Well, one thing again is making sure that the attachments and the notes are included the first time around with the claims. Submit the claims clean the first time. And some of this is the burden on the doctor because if they don't
Hmm.
get their notes done, then the claims are hung up. And that's how they fall through the sand, the sand falls through the cracks and they end up, 2 weeks down the line. And people forget to come back around and check them if they're not running their reports. I would
Sure.
run frequent reports to make sure all the claims are filed,
Yeah.
right? And I would also encourage the doctors to get really good at finalizing their notes
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that they can be submitted. And teams, take really good images. Like right now, most of the insurance companies, especially some of the big guys, are really requiring PAs with your crowns. They want to be able
Hmm.
to see the apex. If you're not taking good images, you're going to get a lot of denials. And
Right.
if you're not pre-authorizing it, you won't know until the patient's left the office and out the door they go. And then you've got a collection problem.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. No, to that point, the collection problem, that's an after the fact problem. You are a big time advocate and champion of prepayment. So let's talk about that. What does that kind of look like? And I can imagine, you encounter a little bit of pushback from some practices when you broach that subject. So what does that kind of look like
Yeah.
to you?
It's pushback at the beginning because they're
Right.
not used to it. They're used to, I'll wait and see what the insurance pays and then we'll call you. And that really is a problem. Once they implement some of our systems, doctors, the most common thing I get is, wow, I didn't know I could do this. And this has been a game changer.
Yeah.
So it
So what's
really,
sort of best practice for you there regarding prepayment? How would you advise that a practice approach that?
first of all, clear agreement on everybody on the team needs to be saying the same thing to the patient about their responsibility to pay their portion.
Sure.
And patients really need to understand that the relationship between the insurance company and the practice is minimal. The patient is the ultimate person responsible for their bill.
Right.
And we may have a discount contractual relationship if you're in a PPO, but honestly, that's like a marketing thing. The
Right.
in exchange for getting listed on their website, you're going to give a discount to their patients. Okay, it's a bad marketing contract, by the way. It's more expensive than Google.
Yeah, well, we could get into that on a whole nother episode for sure.
Right. But if you have clear, upfront, and honest conversations with your patients, you have clear policies in place, and everyone on your team adheres to the policy,
Yeah.
you won't have a problem. And some of those policies can be simply explaining to the patient how long before if you're out of network, how long before you'll charge your bill to them, or maybe you collect up front and don't accept assignment. And there's all different kinds of ways to look at that. My favorite way is to make sure you have a credit card on file
Hmm.
now, or debit card, but I prefer a credit card, of course. But if you can get a credit card on file, you can eliminate a lot of the downstream problems because you can do your best job as you want on verifications, and the insurance company is still able to find a way not to pay that claim. When they
Yeah.
come back and they've increased the patient responsibility, if you have a credit card on file that's pre-authorized for that
Right.
date of service and those procedures, you can charge the balance without having to send a bill.
Yeah. And so, what's the best way to capture that credit card data? At what point in the process do you recommend practices do that?
I recommend that you capture it at the time. Well, first of all, in your financial policy, it needs to clearly state that that's what's expected.
Sure.
But I'd like to do it every time the patient comes in the office. I'd like to get reauthorized for the procedures that they're having done that day. And that
Yeah.
way, when the EOB comes back for that day, you know you have authorization for those procedures. Some offices get like a blanket thing in January, maybe when the patient first renews their policy or when they first come in, but they may not get restorative work until October. They forgot what they said in January.
Right.
And I don't like to spring surprises on the patient. So I like to make sure that every time they come in, they're reaffirming their acknowledgement that this is their responsibility.
Yeah.
That EOB balances will be charged to the credit card on file.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, all of this is so good in theory, but in practice, it can be tough. We're not going to sugarcoat it, of course. You and your company make it a hell of a lot easier. That's
Right.
for sure. But, there's still some, hard work that needs to be done on the practices end of things. And you and I were talking offline prior to recording this that, staffing right now is so hard for practices out there. I feel like I talk about it on every episode. Staffing somehow comes up inevitably. And it's expensive. Finding the right talent and keeping the right talent in a practice is very difficult and costly. And so, who ultimately is responsible for implementing all of these systems that you've laid out here today, and how affordable and feasible is that for most practices? And let's just stay focused on your smaller, maybe solo practitioners or smaller practices in general.
Sure. In the best case scenario, you have an insurance team because it really is a team effort.
Yeah,
Verifications are super time consuming, and you need to have someone dedicated to that who's not going to be interrupted by having to answer the phone or check patients out.
yeah.
Okay. Same thing with pursuing your outstanding claims and just making sure that all the claims are filed cleanly. Um,
And that would ideally, in the best scenario, be the same person handling both those.
in the best case scenario, depending on the size of the practice, once you get to two practitioners, I say one team member minimum per practitioner because if you're going to
Sure.
do 30 claims a day, that's going to take all of your time.
A lot. Yeah.
But an insurance coordinator can wrap that whole situation up really well if you can
Yeah.
afford to have a dedicated insurance coordinator. A lot of practices can't. And then it falls on the office manager. And
Right.
the office manager could be wearing 16 different hats and really not have time to devote to that. The front desk person sometimes who's not the office manager, the one who's answering the phone, scheduling patients, checking people out, and handling all of the crises that arise, sometimes it's put on them
Yep.
and they also don't have time for it.
Yeah.
So personally, outsourcing has been the best scenario for most of the practices I work for. That
And so now your company then will handle that for them. Is that correct?
We do. We
Okay.
absolutely do. We have two ways that we work with practices. If you happen to have a rock star team and you
Hmm.
just want them to get trained, we can do in-house training. But honestly, I don't see that yielding the results most of the time because as soon as you switch a team member, you're starting from scratch again.
Right.
So I prefer the outsourcing, and I think it's becoming ubiquitous across most of healthcare.
Sure.
About, I think 60% even of hospitals outsource a large percentage of their revenue cycle just because it's more cost effective and
Yeah.
it's more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So, how does it work? So, what are some of, I would say, like, what are some of the symptoms, I guess, we're talking healthcare. What are sort of the symptoms that a practice might have that indicates a need for maybe improved revenue cycle management? What are sort of the indicators, the yellow and red flags that you look at that say,
Yeah.
hey, might be time to reevaluate here?
Sure. Well, first of all, of course, the lack of a trained and competent team member to handle it because it takes a trained and competent team member.
Yeah.
Second would be if you notice that your numbers aren't looking like they should. If your production and collections are off,
I'm working really hard here.
yeah,
Yeah.
my wife is mad or my husband's
Yeah.
mad. Yeah, I'm not sending the kids to sports camp this year, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're definitely in because it's going to affect your lifestyle. If you have associates and they're not collecting what they need to, like their own commission, they're going to let you know, hey,
Oh, yeah, they are.
yeah, that's a red flag because you don't want to lose associates. So
Yeah.
there are a couple of stages, but to be honest with you, it should be the first thing on a dentist's mind is am I running a business or a charity? So
Mm,
those numbers need to be looked at from the day you open your doors. And if
yeah.
you're already behind, if you haven't looked at your practice as a business, that's the red flag that you need to address this because that's it. Your bottom line is determining whether or not you're going to be a success or a failure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've talked about a lot of really compelling strategies and tactics that practices can implement to make all of this happen and get back on top of things. But what does it look like, practically speaking, to work with a company like yours? Say, someone is listening today and is saying, well, it might be time to really pop the hood on those reports and see what we can figure out here. I want to give you an opportunity at the end to talk about how to get in touch with you specifically and how to make the connection. But what does the arrangement typically look like when you work with and you onboard a new client?
Sure. Well, we start off with just a conversation to find out, where are the bottlenecks in their practice. And if the bottlenecks are at all around that revenue cycle, we can come in and either take it over, like I said, or craft a customized solution that works for the office. Some just want the verifications done, some just want the claims done, some want the whole shebang.
Yeah.
We also do patient billing, and there's a suite of products that we offer, but it starts with a conversation. Let's talk to the doctor and find out what those pain points are. Sometimes the office manager is included in those conversations at the doctor's discretion.
Yeah.
Next is the onboarding. And in onboarding, we're going to look at what software you're using, what the capabilities of our
Hmm.
software, and also your clearing houses, et cetera. I've picked up practices that are still doing paper claims, believe it or not.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not yours, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully not. But it's a thing. And so helping them to modernize their systems might have to be the first step. But if they have all of the systems in place and they're still having a problem, then we're going to look at how are the customizations being done for that practice? What are the custom codes we can do? What are the protocols? Do you prefer 2 days in advance or 3 days in advance? Are you
Yep.
going to be collecting from the patients? Are we going to be sending them like text reminders for payments, for instance, when the EOB comes in, or do you want us just to charge, the EOB? There's all different kinds of nuances and customizations. Once we get that happening, then we want you to take your hands off and sit back and kind of watch the magic happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where it gets really fun.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Monica. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing your insights and your expertise within this area. If folks do want to, have a consultation with you, what's the best way to find out more about Rev Systems? How can they get in touch with you?
The best way is to go to revsystems.com. That's our website. That's the easiest.
Okay.
And there's always contact sheets on there. I do respond as quickly as I possibly can. It is me responding. I don't have a whole ton of people responding. As I said, I'm a small company relatively, but
Yeah.
I'm passionate about what I do. I'm
Awesome.
passionate about communicating with the doctors, keeping in touch, monthly reports and things. My team members are equally passionate. And I like to think of it as an extension of your team
Yeah.
at about a 30% discount because you don't have to pay employee taxes and benefits. So,
Right. Yeah. Pretty nice. Well,
yeah.
that's great. Thank you so much. And I'll put all that information, your website, your contact info in the show notes. So, folks, if you're listening and you're interested in connecting with Monica, check that out there at dentalscapes.com/podcast. And in any case, Monica, thank you so much for dropping by. I do hope that we can have another conversation in the future. I'd love to bring you back if you're at all interested.
And I will nerd out on this topic as often as you want. Just invite me
Well,
back
you're just down the road from me, actually. We just found out you're in Hillsborough. I'm in Chapel Hill, so we'll have to do this. Maybe we can record the next one in person sometime.
in a coffee shop.
All right.
All
All
right.
right.
Take
Well, sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Monica. If you're just joining us for the first time on Dental Domination Podcast, thank you so much for listening in. If you enjoyed what you heard today, I would please ask you, go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your shows. Leave us a 5-star review and a comment if you're willing. It's the best way to help us find new practices to reach and help, and I can't thank you enough. So thank you all for listening in. Thank you so much for stopping by today, Monica, and we'll be in touch. Take care.
you. Take care.
All right. We'll see you.